We're going to spend some time talking about Python so you can get a little familiar with it. Before we get started, let's find a place to be able to put our projects. So we're going to open the terminal. You can open the terminal by clicking on the terminal icon or pressing Control-Alt-T. Now that we're inside the terminal, let's go over some of the commands that we will be utilizing. So the first command is ls. ls lists all of the folders that are found in the current directory. Our current directory is /home/pi. So if I press ls, I get a list of folders and documents. The folders are in blue and the documents are in white that are found in this current directory. The next command that I'm going to issue is cd. cd stands for change directory. Then I put a space and I indicate the directory that I want to change to. Now remember, all of those blue folders that we've just discovered in ls are directories that we can change into. We'll begin by typing capital DES and then pressing the tab key. The tab key will do an autocomplete. If I only did a D and pressed tab, then it would show me desktop and download and documents. So get as many characters as you can to uniquely identify it and then press the tab button and return. You'll now notice that we are in the root folder, which is home pi, and then now we are in the directory of desktop. The first command that I like to issue anytime I'm in a directory is the ls command. Let's see if there's anything in there. On my machine, I don't have any folders or directories in the desktop, so now I'm going to make a directory. In order to make a directory, I'm going to issue the command mkdir space, and then I'm going to name the directory. In my case, I'm going to call this Scott's Pi Projects. You should create a directory on your desktop with your name in it called Pi Projects if it doesn't already exist. After I've created the directory, I will run the ls command once more time on the desktop, and we'll see that now I have Scott's Pi's projects in the directory. Now that we've created a directory, let's go into our File Explorer and find it. If we open the File Explorer, we can then click on Desktop, and you should see your folder there. Mine is Scott's Pi Project. I'll double click on it. The folder is currently empty. We can add a file directly in the directory by right-clicking and selecting Create New Empty File. You'll name your file Hello World. Notice that I have no spaces and I have a capital H and a capital W. At the end of the Hello World, put the extension .py. This .py indicates to the processor that this is a Python file. Click OK to create the file. Now if I double-click on the Hello World, I pull up an empty document. The Raspbian operating system knows that this is a Python script, so it pulls up a program that we can run Python in. This particular application is called Thony. Thony is a Pi IDE. Our first code that we're going to write in Thony. The top portion of the program is for the actual code that we write. On the bottom portion of the program, you'll see a section called Shell. This is where we can run the Python program we've created. It's a tradition amongst programmers when they're first encountering a language that they execute a hello world statement. This has been done for a long time, pretty much ever since programmers have been around. So let's go ahead and figure out how we get Python to print out to the console hello world. So put your cursor in the top portion of Thony and click on there, and we'll write our first line of code. The first statement that we will write is the print statement. The print statement is used to print the characters identified in the statement to the console. We'll use this often when we're doing diagnosis on our electronic circuits or when we want to get information from the Pi and the sensors that it's reading. The print statement is very useful. So we start the print statement by typing the word print. We want to do that in lowercase. Python's language can be a little bit challenging because the spaces in the language matter. So make sure that you have the appropriate amount of spaces and indentation. So here we go. We're going to write print space. Now we do in open and close parentheses. This tells us that whatever the print is, we want to, or whatever is inside of these parentheses is what we want to print. If we put then, if we want to print a string, which is what we want to do, we want to print the text hello world, I'll put a double quote and type in the word hello world. So this could be anything inside this string, and make sure that I've closed it with the closed parentheses, and that's our first print statement. Now we're going to run our current script. So go to the top of the IDE and you will see a play button. As long as everything is correct in the code, when I press the play button, I should see hello world. We can also run the same type of a statement in the command line. So open up the terminal and navigate to the appropriate folder. And then let's do an ls to determine if we have the file in the appropriate folder. And we do. We have hello world.py. In order to execute Python, I need to write the command python space and then hello world. Remember, I can type HE and press the tab key and it will auto-complete. When I press enter, we see that hello world is printed in the terminal. Congratulations, we've run our first Python script, hopefully. If you came across an error, then we need to go back and look at our code. I'll show you an example of what would happen if we had an error. So I'm going to go back to the code and I'm going to remove the closed parentheses. Remember that the Python engine is trying to look for a statement that has print, and it goes and starts at the open parentheses and it ends at the closing parentheses. If that closing parentheses is missing, there's a problem. It'll form or create a syntax error. In the Thony IDE, we're actually shown where the Python thinks that there is a problem. So we'll look there to try to figure out what's wrong with our code. We can also run the script again in the command line, and we can see that an error code comes up, that there's a syntax error. Sometimes it can be a little less clear in the command line where the error has occurred. The thing that you should look for is the line number. It's possible that the line that you're currently on has a problem, or the line before, or the line after. That's typically where you look. Debugging a script that you have written can be somewhat challenging. So just be patient and try to approach it with a systematic approach. Let's go back and fix our code. So we'll put a closed parentheses in place. The next thing that we want to look at is a variable. A variable is a way for us to assign a value to a string. So let's write a string name. We can name this anything. For clarity, I'm going to call this hello variable. I then put a space and use the equal sign to assign the value. Now I want the value to be hello world, and I put that in quotes to designate this as a string. Now I can remove the hello world in my print statement and replace it with the variable. When I save and run the command, it runs exactly as it did before. Now notice I could actually shorten up the variable and it could only be one letter. So in this example here we have just an H. When I remove the rest of the characters, it still works and functions correctly. Now let's take a look in the terminal. So in the terminal, I'm going to run the code python hello world.py, and I get what I expect, hello world, back as the reply. There may come a time when you're working with the Raspberry Pi that you need to make an edit to a script. If you were to connect to the Raspberry Pi externally through an SSH, you would need to interact with that Raspberry Pi only through the terminal. So in order to make modifications to our script, we can run a text editor inside of the terminal. That text editor is called Nano. If we type Nano space and then put the file name, it will open our file in a text editor in the command line or terminal. Here's our file running in Nano. We can see that it matches the file as we last saved it. It can be somewhat challenging navigating through a terminal driven text editor. There's some learning curve to learn how to appropriately navigate through and save and edit. So Nano is probably the easiest command line. There are other ones, command line text editor. There are other programs that we could run, but they're even more complicated. We're going to use the arrow keys to navigate back and forth between the files. So let's change our variable. This time let's call it hello world. So I can type in hello world and then I can go to the next line in the print statement and type in hello world. Now that I've made the modifications to the file, I need to save it. In order to save, I press Control X. You'll notice these menu options are available down at the bottom. As soon as I press Control X, it asks me whether or not I want to save the file. If you press Y, that will save the file. And then I am given the name of the file. If I wanted to create a new name, I could, but in this case we want to just return the file back to a variable that makes sense. We'll go back to the IDE and take a look at our file. Notice that there hasn't been any changes that we can see in the file. In order to ensure that we have the most updated information from the file, let's restart our IDE. So close it out and then go back and double click on Hello World. When we double click on Hello World, we see the IDE pulls it up and the changes that we made in Nano have now taken effect. When we run the script, we're back to printing Hello World. So hopefully this was valuable to you as we start exploring Python. A lot of the code that we're going to encounter has already been written. There'll be circumstances where you'll be making minor changes to the code. This is where it's important to understand the IDE, the command line, and some of the tools that are available to you to modify files on a Raspberry Pi.